now doing on a Tuesday. Unlike our traditional slot of Friday, we are doing a special webinar on Tuesday on unemployment situation in the country. There's been a very heated debate. There are extreme positions as to what is the employment situation. There are studies, there is CLEMS data, there is CMI, which show very different positions and very angular. We thought it will be important to discuss about this issue. As you know, EGROW Foundation is a research-based think tank. It's a policy advisory body which focuses on research-based advice. On a contemporary burning issue of employment, it was then important that we bring it up and we discuss as to what is the whole issue and try to bring in as much clarity as possible on this. To discuss this issue, extremely important conceptual and a policy issue, we specially invited Dr. Arvind Virmani, member Niti Aayog, who has soiled his hands in policy making for a very long time. We also have invited Professor Goldar, who has done good quality work on employment, and as a discussant, we have invited Professor Kundu and Dr. Bhalla. We will also have two more informal discussants who have gone through the paper and the debate and will participate. Let me formally introduce the chairman for the day. Dr. Arvind Virmani is member of Niti Aayog. He was our chairman, EGROW Foundation, and he is the founder chairman of EGROW Foundation. He is also the president of the Forum for Strategic Initiatives. He has been a mentor to FICCI and member of RBI Technical Advisory Committee on Monetary Policy. Earlier, he was executive director at the IMF, chief economic advisor, Ministry of Finance, and principal advisor, Planning Commission. During his tenure, he has extensively worked on policy issues. He has numerous, nearly 100 policy paper notes and reports and contributions in major committees. He has also served as member Telecom Regulatory Authority of India and as director and chief executive of the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations. He also has 35 journal articles and 20 book chapters and written over 50 other working papers in the areas of macroeconomics, growth, finance, tax reform, international trade and tariffs, international relations, and national security strategy. The main speaker today is Professor Goldar. Professor Goldar retired from Institute of Economic Growth, Delhi. He was at IEG from 1979 to 2014, except for 3 brief stints at a professional or equivalent position at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy for 2 years, EGROW for a year, and JNU again for a year. During 2015-16, he was a National Fellow of the Indian Council of Social Science Research, affiliated with IEG. He is a former member of the National Statistical Commission. Professor Goldar specializes in industrial economics and international trade. The bulk of his research has been on productivity and employment in Indian industries, wage share and price cost margin in Indian manufacturing, export performance of industrial firms, effective protection of Indian industries, impact of trade reforms on the performance of industrial firms, and foreign direct investment in India. He has also undertaken studies on pollution of river water in India and on environmental aspects of Indian industries, including studies on energy efficiency in Indian industrial firms and the impact of environmental performance of industrial firms on their stock prices. He is a master's in economics and PhD from Delhi School of Economics. Our first discussant today will be Professor Kundu. Professor Kundu is a senior fellow with the Sustainable Cities and Transport Program at WRI India. Professor Kundu has been a distinguished fellow at Research and Information System for Developing Countries, Delhi. He was professor and dean of the School of Social Sciences at JNU, a member of National Statistical Commission, and chaired the Post-Structure Evaluation Committee, and that for estimating urban housing shortage. He is very well known for his report on housing in India. He was regional advisor on poverty at UNESCO, Beirut, and consultant to Sri Lankan government on population census. Currently, he is chairing a committee to monitor the national survey being conducted for Swachh Bharat mission for the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. Our second discussant for the day is Dr. Surjit Bhalla. Dr. Surjit Bhalla has been a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. He was the executive director at the International Monetary Fund. Earlier, he was a member of the Secondary Markets Advisory Committee of SEBI and the National Statistical Commission of India. We all know Dr. Bhalla. He writes extensively on economic issues and has also authored a very important book titled The New Wealth of Nations. With this, I hand over the session to Dr. Arvind Virmani to take the proceedings further. Sir.
Thank you, Charan. It's a pleasure to be. Hello. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and to I'd like to welcome Dr. Goldar. We have had a long association. I still remember a paper we did together in EGROW many decades ago. And of course, I've read many of his works since then, and especially recently. So I look forward to his talk. Professor Goldar.
Hello, everyone. I will start my presentation. I'll share my screen. Am I audible?
Yes.
So first of all, I thank EGROW Foundation for this opportunity to share and discuss my research with Professor Suresh Agarwal. Suresh and I have been doing a number of papers, almost 2-3 years. Of course, we have a long association. And I'm happy that Dr. Surjit Bhalla and Professor Amitabh Kundu are going to comment on the presentation and also give their own perspective. I have a long presentation, but I'll try to summarize places so that it can be done quickly. Yeah, it's working. So this is the sort of outline. First, I look at growth rates of employment recent years, then the trends in employment in formal manufacturing, then some patterns observed in the manufacturing employment growth, followed by what factors are contributing to an accelerated manufacturing employment growth, and future way forward, what we can do. And finally, point 6 is a related issue of how one should treat the unpaid female workers in agriculture in judging our achievements in employment generation. So we go to the employment growth. These are the top numbers. Aggregate employment growth is about 8% last year, and manufacturing employment growth last year was 10%. Over the last 4 years, manufacturing employment growth was about average 7%, which is unprecedented, and growth is mainly coming from rural female workforce participation, which is growing, and that is contributing to these growths. Somehow this are not working. It's not working. This is the broad pattern you can see. There are upward trends, and 2023 there is a major hike. You can see the hike in overall from 549 to 594 million people. There is growth in agriculture, growth in manufacturing, growth in services. Construction is the only sector where there is a fall in employment in 2023 compared to 2022. And if you look at the right side of the screen, manufacturing growth was 5% in 2020, 8% in 2021, 4% in 22-23, and 10% in 2020. This shows, the table shows the sort of industry-wise breakup, and you can see our growth according to our calculations were 8.2%, and comparable numbers from India claims data are 7.8. I must point out that India claims data does not show 6% growth as some have been reporting, but it shows actually 8% growth. And if you go by industry-wise, manufacturing 10% growth, agriculture 11% growth, trade 10% growth, services other than trade and transport 9%. Now, we also compare our research with Dr. Bala Krishna Padhi, Pilani, because he has been working in the area of employment, and he's very careful, done estimates of employment, and we find more or less, I mean, good match between what his estimates and our estimates of employment growth between 2017-18 and 2023, which gives us confidence in the estimates we have. And also this one is very interesting because the PLFS data is showing that there was a decline in agricultural employment between 2000, US and PLFs together. From 2004 to 2018, there was an absolute decline in agricultural employment. And after 18, the agricultural employment has started growing, and the share of agriculture in total employment has also started growing. Professor Nilabja Ghosh of the Institute of Economic Growth has created an alternate employment series using the cost of cultivation data, and that actually shows the same pattern, and that there is a decline in the employment in crops cultivation from 2005 to 2018, and after 18 it has started growing. So two independent bodies of data are showing exactly the same pattern in the agricultural sector. Has employment increased in informal manufacturing? The answer is yes. I must repeat it. The answer is yes. You look at the series. Column 1 shows the total employment in the manufacturing sector, which is based on PLFS from 17 to 23. And earlier, because there is not a corresponding figure, so Labor Bureau estimates are there. The second column shows the factory sector employment, which is based on annual survey of industries. If you subtract column 2 from column 1, the balance is non-factory employment in manufacturing, which is roughly equal to informal manufacturing. And the growth rate is about 5% per year in the last 6 years. Between 15 and 23, there is some issues because the data for sorry, what was that? Anyway, the 2015 data are from Labor Bureau, so there may be slight problem of comparability, but one cannot be too sure of that number as to whether we are getting the right number for informal. But still, overall, it seems there is a. I think there was a question being raised that these numbers are not correct, but all those questions I will answer at the end. If there are some doubts about those numbers, I will answer them at the end. There is clear indication that in the informal manufacturing segment, there is, at least if you look at the last data from 17 onwards, which is based on PLFS, there is clearly an increase in it. This is the this row is the factory sector based on ASI. This is the total employment based on PLFS and earlier, and you can see the gap is rising. The point is very simple. Informal segment of manufacturing constitutes 75% of the total manufacturing employment. If the overall manufacturing employment is growing, informal manufacturing has to grow. There is no other way out. Now, some recently published articles have reported that employment in informal sector is falling. They are comparing the annual survey of unincorporated sector enterprises called SUSE 2022 and the 73rd round NSS 15-16. First point is this assessment is not proper. The enterprise surveys of NSS are primarily meant to compute rates and ratios. So you can compare GVA per worker, but you cannot compare GVA or you cannot compare number of workers. And look at these estimates from KVIC, which if constitutes a sizable part of the informal manufacturing. KVIC employment has grown from 12.3 million to 17.7 million. This indicates a rise because KVIC is a part of informal manufacturing. If there was a really fall in informal manufacturing employment, KVIC employment should not have grown. So these are all evidences pointing towards a rising employment in informal manufacturing. Look at this table. This is the 56th round enterprise survey of NSS and 62nd round between 2000 and 2005. If you look at the number of enterprises, it has fallen. If you look at the number of workers, it has fallen. Is that a correct inference? No. Because you cannot compare two enterprise surveys. Enterprise surveys are basically meant to compare ratios. And GVA per worker rising, that is okay because you can compare GVA per worker. Look at the employment numbers for these 2 years coming from India claims data from 44 million to 52 million, about 8 million rise, which is the correct picture. And this shows again brings out why one should not compare two enterprise surveys. By the same logic, there is no point in comparing NSS 73rd round and SUSE and then coming to the conclusion that employment in informal segment of the economy is falling. That I think is incorrect. Patterns in manufacturing employment growth. First pattern is rural share is rising in manufacturing. Second, this can be also shown here. Between 2017 to 2023, 70% of the employment has occurred in rural area, only 30% has occurred in the urban. Because manufacturing is shifting towards the rural areas. Second is, more recently, women account for the incremental part of the manufacturing employment. In 23, 70% of the employment was accounted for by women and 52% of by rural women. Go back 17 to 22, 64% of the incremental employment were women and 40% were rural women. Go back into the old earlier days, 99 to 2000, only 20% of the incremental women. So we are seeing a major change. These numbers do not change if you leave out unpaid workers. Now, why I'm saying we have to leave out unpaid work? I don't think we should have to leave out, but a concern is now being raised that unpaid workers, there is an issue and we should think of estimates without the unpaid workers. Well, even if you leave out the unpaid workers, the numbers remain the same. So look at these 22 to 23, 67% of the incremental employment was accounted for by women, and rural women accounted for 49%, even after leaving out unpaid workers. I will get back to the unpaid worker business as to what is to be done. Look at the growth rate of manufacturing employment. Whether we take unpaid workers or we exclude the unpaid workers, growth rate do not differ much. And so look at 22-23 without unpaid workers, including unpaid workers, growth rate is 9.9, excluding unpaid workers 9.4, no great fall. On earlier years also, a similar pattern. If you look at state-wise pattern of growth between 2017, 18 and 23, most states employment grew at 4% plus. And in most states, female employment in manufacturing grew at 10% plus. That is, this again shows the same pattern that women are now occupying or accounting for greater part of the manufacturing employment that states. How do you explain this rapid growth? I said 7% growth in manufacturing employment in recent years. Somebody asked, what is manufacturing? I don't think I have to explain what is manufacturing. I mean, you look at the NIC codes from 10 to 33. Please look up your NIC codes 2008, 10 to 33, starting from food manufacturing, food products manufacturing, till textiles, machinery, transport equipment, and other manufacturing. Everything is a part of the manufacturing sector. The first reason why the manufacturing sector growth has become faster is that agriculture sector's growth has become faster. If you look at the agricultural GDP numbers, this is a 3-year moving average and a trend fitted to that. More recently, agriculture growth has been much faster. it has risen to about 4 to 5%. We had now about above 4% growth for 6 consecutive years in the 3-year moving average. This fast growth in employment contributes to fast growth in manufacturing employment. Also, this is known in the literature. The agricultural fast growth leads to rural manufacturing growth and manufacturing. What is the second factor? This is supply side factor. Because of increase in the female workforce participation rate, there is greater availability of workers for employment in manufacturing. And this is helping manufacturing from the supply side. Now, how do I know that? You can look at this data. On axis shows states, how much has been the increase in the female workforce participation rate, and the Y side is the growth rate. You can see a strong positive correlation. The states where the female workforce participation rate has increased are also the states where growth rate has been higher. Strong correlation being shown that increase in the female workforce participation is contributing to higher manufacturing. This shows how the female workforce participation is changing. For between 22 and 23, there's the analysis being done for 467 districts, and there is a rightward shift in the distribution. And if you look at annual figures, earlier it was going up by about 2.5 percentage point each year, but last year female workforce participation rate in rural areas rose by 10 percentage point. There is a belief that if our female workforce participation rate reaches 50%, we can raise our GDP growth rate by 1 percentage point. And we are almost reaching there in the rural areas. But this is not the only factor. There are many other factors which has helped manufacturing sector growth and manufacturing employment growth. Ease of labor regulations, financial inclusion, ease of doing business, improvement in infrastructure, massive improvement in infrastructure, digitalization, skill development, workplace safety, and most important, easing of labor regulation. There is a study by Chakravarti and Mahajan which shows that how easing of labor regulation leads to bigger units, and the bigger units are able to employ more women workers because they have more staff welfare expenses, amenities at workplace, etc. There are several papers that I have, some with Parita and some with Kukrej and Puri, and my own work, which has come recently, just 1 week ago, in EPW, shows that labor reforms contribute to employment growth. And this diagram shows number of states which have done labor reforms in terms of amendment to IDA, which is raising the limit to 300 workers from 100, and the other is a reform to Factories Act, raising it from 10 workers to 20 workers. And as you can see, more recently, there's a huge increase in the number of states which have undertaken such reform. This has obviously contributed to what is the way forward. Now, there has been lately a lot of discussion on what is to be done. And so this portion I will not discuss so much, but what is the additional points we have, I'll focus on that. This is the long list really. Implementation of new labor codes, improving ease of doing business, promoting SMEs through technical support, finance, promoting labor-intensive industries, improving competitiveness through R&D, having a competitive exchange rate, enhancing employability through education, skill training, and a growth-oriented industrial policy, and also through relaxation in land regulations. How can you allow capacity expansion within the same land area possessed by industrial units and thereby control? These have lately been discussed, and also this newly which has come in the budget, the apprentice scheme, which adds to the employability, enhances employability through education and skill training. These are the points which we have. Over the last 6 years, about 8 crore rural women have joined the workforce. This is an excellent opportunity to push up India's GDP growth rate by 1% by shifting a substantial portion of these new women workers from agriculture to manufacturing services. So what can be done? A, development of rural infrastructure, including digital infrastructure, increasing access of rural women to smart mobiles, and improved access to fintech, which can lead to financial inclusion. So these are the basic sort of recommendations that are emerging. So we need technical education for women at an extensive scale, technical and financial support to women-owned enterprises. There's a paper by Gupta et al., the World Bank paper, which has suggested that there should be a subcategory for women-owned enterprises within the priority sector lending, which I fully support. And this, I think, is really a good suggestion. And finally, women's safety is the topmost. At workplace, in day-to-day life, everywhere, women's safety is the must if we want to have more employment of women and more employment in manufacturing. This is the sort of final section, which is not directly related to manufacturing, but has important bearing. I think I'm well within time. Maybe I have done 20 minutes. I was allotted 40. Now, if you look at the growth in employment, most of the concerns are coming regarding unpaid rural female worker. That is the concern. Now, unpaid rural female workers constitute only 1/4 of the total increase that taking place. Yet, a lot of discussion is about unpaid rural female workers. Should they be counted in worker or should they not be counted in workers? Let's proceed. What is the issue? Significant increases in employment have taken place in India in the last few years, but there is a view that these achievements need to be discounted or devaluated because a large part of the increase arose from employment of unpaid family workers, which are all called helpers. So because this increase is happening in helpers, so you should not take you should discount the increase that's taking place. An implicit supposition behind this argument is that the marginal productivity of such workers is low or could even be zero, there is a widespread disguised unemployment. So this is what I will contest in this presentation. There is no widespread disguised unemployment. So this issue is discussed in the context of agriculture. By extension, this also applies to manufacturing, smaller enterprises. But is it true? Now look at this. There is no doubt that we need to shift workers from agriculture to manufacturing and other non-agricultural activities so that productivity can increase. But is this statement correct, which is being questioned? There is widespread disguised unemployment among unpaid workers in agriculture and by extension in micro non-agricultural enterprises, so that the recently achieved large increases in unpaid female workers in rural areas does not amount to any significant achievements in job creation. This is the statement. That is what I'm challenging. Empirical evidence is first presented, then theoretical arguments are made why these are not correct. First is empirics. You think of two families, both having 5 workers. One family has all 5 workers paid. One family has 5 workers, but some are unpaid female. One unpaid female worker, what unpaid female means their own farm. There is somebody from the family, female, working there who is not paid. Which family will have more income? Now, if unpaid female workers are less productive and their productivity is almost zero, then the second family, which has unpaid female workers, their income should be low and their consumption should be low. But that's not the case. Their consumption distributions are almost the same. Rather, average consumption of the family with unpaid female worker is rupees 1890. And average consumption, per capita consumption of families without unpaid female worker is 1800. So it is the families with unpaid female worker, their consumption is higher than the families with all paid workers. So where is the ground to believe that this is done for 5 workers, this is done for 4 workers, then this is done for 3 worker families, this is done for 2 workers families. Everywhere there is no difference between the work families which have unpaid female workers and those who have all paid workers, female or male. So this is the empirical evidence which is a serious doubt of this claim that unpaid female workers are disguisedly unemployed, that productivity is almost zero, and they are not contributing anything to the family. Now quickly, I don't know how much time I have. But anyway, I will quickly go through this. Sorry, can I continue? Now this is an example I want to show. Yeah, I can show. There is a farmer, his brother, farmer's wife, farmer's old parents, farmer's children, and a casual worker. First case, farmer, brother, and casual worker are working on the field. Field is good enough to work for 3 people. There is disguised unemployment, no. Wife is working is at home and looking after parents and children. Next, the casual workers' wages become very high. So casual worker, they can't hire, it becomes too costly. So farmer's wife is working, there are 3 people working. Is there disguised unemployment? No. the brother gets a job in the bank, so therefore the wife starts working on the farm. Is there disguised unemployment? No. So you can say three cases. An unpaid worker is not necessarily unproductive. Brother was unpaid worker. Wife was unpaid worker. They are not necessarily unproductive with negligible and zero. In all three cases, there was no disguised unemployment. So if an unpaid female worker replaces a male worker who was working earlier, like brother was replaced by wife, why should she be treated as low or negligible productivity? Consider this case. Between 2019 and 2022, employment of rural males fell, not increased, fell by 13 million. And in these 2 years, female workers in agriculture increased by 22 million. So out of 22 million, 13 million just replaced the male workers. So if more than half of these women took up the jobs vacated by male workers in rural areas who left in search of better employment opportunities. Now, if men doing the jobs were not disguisedly unemployed, then why should the women who take up the same jobs after males have left those jobs become disguisedly unemployed? So at least half of the females you can't say disguisedly employed because they have taken the same jobs which males were doing, they have left them, and so females have gone. So does it mean a job as long as a man is doing, it is productive? As soon as a man goes and a woman does, it becomes unproductive. Now this is a case where there can be disguised unemployment. Apparently, because what happens is farmer's brother does not go to bank. Farmer and brother, they work less than before because they give more importance to their leisure than the care work done by the wife, including self-care. They say, we can't work so much. You must come and work in the. So there are now 4 people in the field. So apparently one will say, well, there are more people than required and there is disguised unemployment. But actually this is not true. This point needs to be developed, but we don't have time. So out of the 4 cases, the possibility of disguised unemployment arises in only one case, situation D. But if all members of the family have a say in the decision-making process and sufficient value is placed by the family to care work done by the farmer's wife, disguised unemployment cannot arise because if the marginal productivity of the unpaid female worker is zero, is negligible, they can shift from farmer to care work and enhance the family welfare of the family. This is a very fine point in economics because there is an opportunity cost of working on the farm. If the opportunity cost is high, then it is better to do the care work than the work on the farm if you are not really contributing anything. The fact that she is there means she is contributing something. I will skip these things and then come to a model and theoretical work that Professor Arvind Sen and I have done. This bit mathematical, but I'll come to the main conclusion. This is the proposition based on a man, woman, and a casual worker, that's theoretically done. Proposition is an increase in the wage rate leads to an increase in the supply of labor of both male and female to the household farm, a decrease in the domestic work by female, and decrease in the employment of the outside worker, and a decrease in consumption and an overall decrease in household farm. Sorry, I cannot discuss this mathematics in detail, but there is a utility function, there is a production function based on these inferences being drawn, and mathematics can be checked and there has a mathematical proof for that. And the implication is, if the cost of living of landless labor household goes down in rural areas, leading to a reduction in the reservation wage rate, then this will augment agricultural production in the country and enhance the welfare of farmers. Opposite is, if there is a substantial increase in work opportunities at a higher wages in nearby urban areas, and this will raise rural wages, in that case, the hike in the reservation wages in rural areas will adversely impact agricultural production and reduce the welfare of the farmer household. In this case, women in the rural households will have to increase their participation in the work done at the farm because casual worker becomes more costly. Now, this is a particular case where we are saying there is an E bar, there is a maximum amount of effort people can make beyond which there is zero return. So we are bringing in the diminishing returns. The diminishing returns is at E bar. E is 3 and effort, females, workers effort. These are the optimal levels. The theorem is that if given our assumptions, these 3 cannot go beyond E bar. We prove mathematically. It cannot be more than E bar. And the interpretation is there can be disguised unemployment if there is a paid casual worker and a care work has a positive effect on family welfare. Over half of the new female workers in agriculture have taken up the jobs previously being done by males who left because of better job opportunities elsewhere. If men had productive jobs, why should the jobs turn unproductive when women replace men? This applies to half of the new male workers. Even if a rural woman is a added worker to a firm, her marginal productivity will be positive as long as there is a paid casual work on the firm. Proposition 3, which mathematically prove. Even if there is no casual worker, her marginal work is above zero if all family members have a say in decision making and the family places value on care work. Why this is happening? Because if care work is important, family will decide there is no point for the wife to go to a field and waste her time. She can do much better by taking care of the family. And finally, even if farmer documents dominates the decision making, gives much greater importance to his own leisure than care, productivity of the unpaid worker will still be positive if she does skilled work. The question is, do women in agriculture do skilled work? They indeed do. Look at this paper by Nageswar and based in Mint. According to this, skilled labor done by women has risen from 48% to 59%. Then somebody can say, okay, sorry, that was a mistake. They are not disguised unemployed, but they are underemployed. Okay, is that fair? I say that's also not fair. Females, paid workers in agriculture in rural areas work about 5 hours a day based on PLFST. Unpaid female workers who are family workers working in the field work 4.5 hours a day. So she works in addition 7 hours on unpaid domestic work and care work. So total she works about 12 hours a day. Just because she has worked half an hour less, does it make her underemployed? I doubt. This I will skip because lack of time. So key messages. 4 key messages. Rapid growth in manufacturing employment in recent years, 7% over last 4 years. Growth in informal manufacturing the last 5 years, 6 years at 5% per annum or more. First message. Second, several factors contributed to manufacturing employment growth, including reforms. That is, I think, topmost. Skill and infrastructure development, digitization, faster agricultural growth, and very important, significant increase in rural female workforce participation, which has made large number of workers available in rural areas. Third, the large increase in female workers in rural areas in recent years could be channelized into faster GDP growth if a substantial portion of these workers are shifted to manufacturing services. But we need a host of policy measures to achieve this transformation. Of them, the most critical is technical and financial support to women-owned enterprises in rural areas. That we consider the most important. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Very interesting talk. Let me turn immediately to Professor Amitabh Kundu for his comments. Charan, we're keeping like 15 minutes for that, or? Charan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. About 15 minutes.
Okay. Go ahead, Professor.
There's no limit. No.
Yeah.
Dr. Virmani, Professor Goldar.
Yes, please go ahead.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Right. It's a privilege for me to be part of this panel discussion, the webinar. And I'm really grateful to EGROW Foundation, particularly Dr. Charan Singh, for giving me this great learning opportunity, investigating into the issue of the controversial issue of the growth of the manufacturing sector in India in recent years. And I must say it has been a learning experience, although some of the questions that I have in my mind, in fact, myself, Mr. Mohanan and Mehboob Rahman, we are all doing an unpaid joint family research. And we are really trying to find out the problems of comparing the data from different surveys and what are the issues involved. I'm very happy to know from Dr. Goldar's presentation that unpaid family work is not necessarily less remunerative. It can be more remunerative than the paid research work. So that boosts our ego. I remember that Dr. Goldar, whether you remember or not, before about half a century in the, India Coffee House or in the stairs of Delhi School of Economics, you were discussing a paper, a theoretical paper, and you wrote a comment on that, which was published in an international journal, which was really appreciated. And I still remember the deep theoretical insight that you provided in your commentary. I was equally impressed by your, empirical rigor in presenting the arguments here. Although I think the task that you have here is much more challenging, basically because of the issue that I raised, that you're using 3 different sets of data from 3 different surveys, and you rightly pointed out the problems of comparing the data when somebody is using us-use data comparing with NSA enterprise. Well, there are issues, but certainly it is very challenging to have the comparisons and come to neat results. So before I share some of my concerns, and I really wanted to join to see whether my queries are answered in your analysis. Before I raise those issues, let me point out 1 or 2 marginal points, and I don't know, the clarifications. You have started by talking about this Labor Bureau's data. The data, the first annual employment survey data was not brought out because of the problems, but they have the data. The 6th annual survey employment data is available for 2016-17. But you use only up to 15-16, and then you interpolate by taking the data from PLFS for 17-18 and build up the estimate for 2016-17. I didn't understand why did you do that, because we have the data for 2016-17 from the Ministry of Labor. Now, if you take the 16-17 data from the 6th annual survey, you even get a higher growth rate, because the estimated figure, the figure that you have, and the actual figure is in fact lower than that. So you will get a higher growth rate. So I was just wondering, why didn't you? It's a marginal point. It really doesn't affect the arguments. The second point that strikes me, again, this is completely for my clarification. I was looking at the claims data on manufacturing and your data on factory and non-factory employment in manufacturing. I find significant difference. I just wanted to know why this difference is there. For example, for 2022-23, the claims figure is less than Goldar Agrawal's figure by about 7.8 million into 22-23. Whereas the starting year, 2015-16, I mean, if I take that as the starting year, you do find that claims figure is higher. So Goldar Agrawal start with a lower manufacturing employment data for 2015-16, but come to a figure which is about something like 70 million, which is, as I said, 7.8 million higher than the claims data. Not only the figure, absolute figure is so very different for the year 2022-23. There must be a reason. I was just wondering whether it is because some 15 plus year elderly people have taken in and those below have been excluded, or perhaps more plausibly, the population figure that have been used in getting the absolute number in the 2 studies are very different. I just wanted to make sure of that, because the real hero in my mind, which we are ignoring in the analysis, Dr. Goldar, is the population growth rate, which is the multiplier for getting the absolute number of workers. I would just come to that in a little while. But again, this clarification, I just wanted to seek, because economic survey data, the latest one, talks about the total employment, which is must for 2022-23, which is, not 597, it is something like 560. How come the figure in economic survey for the same year is less? Is it because the population figures used in getting the estimates are different, or there is age group? This is one clarification I have not been able to resolve. I hope Dr. Goldar would be able to clarify. Now, not only that, your manufacturing employment data in the terminal year is higher, but even the pattern is very different. Claims data suggests that the manufacturing sector did not show any increase in manufacturing employment between 2015 to 2019. There's absolutely no increase in the manufacturing employment. And 2019-20, the COVID year, there is small increase, but after that, 2020 to 2023, there's a very significant rise as far as claims data is concerned, whereas your trends are somewhat different. You are suggesting a very high growth in employment, manufacturing employment during 2015 to 2019, which is very, very fast. 2019-20 COVID year is slightly, dump, it is low, but subsequently again the growth rate picks up, but still the growth in manufacturing employment in your paper is less compared to the growth in manufacturing employment during 2015 to 2019. I'm saying your growth in the later period, 4 years, is less, although it is high, it is less than that of the earlier period. I just wanted to know why this difference is coming. Can I have given 4 slides. Vivek, is it possible to show these slides? I just thought I will share my concern about the comparability of the data from different sources. Okay, so now I was talking about 3 different sources. One is PLFS. I'm sure this is known to everyone who work on the employment data. PLFS provides employment from the individual's perspective and are most comprehensive. But they gave WPR, work participant rate, industry distribution, but doesn't give any absolute estimate. That is true for others also, but that is one thing, that it is coming from the household and it is capturing information at the individual level. Unorganized sector surveys looks at employment from the enterprise perspective. Positions and not persons are counted, which means if the husband and wife are managing a shop, they will be counted as one. If that fellow has employed 2 persons for, from his shop to be delivered, something to be delivered, and do 2 persons keep on changing, then he will still report 2 positions. Whereas PLFS counts individuals. So there are problems.
Sir, please unmute. You got muted.
I think he's muted, so nobody's able to hear.
Kundu sir, you are muted. Please unmute.
Sir, we are unable to hear you.
Hello, Professor Kundu.
Kundu, you unmute yourself, please. Please unmute yourself, Professor Kundu.
Better give you phone call to Professor Kundu so that he.
Sorry. Am I not? Since when did I get unmuted. I was trying to say that please move forward.
5
Am I-
minutes.
Second point.
Is this slide, did I explain this slide? The PLFS provides employment from individual's perspective and is the most comprehensive. It gives work participation rate, industrial distribution, but does not give the total absolute number. Unorganized sector surveys, on the other hand, looks at the number of positions. They look at employment from the enterprise's perspective. For example, if a shopkeeper and his wife are sharing the responsibility of managing, it will be counted as one. If that person has employed 3 workers and they keep on changing, one day 3 fellows come and other day another 3 persons, they will be counted as 3. It does not count individuals. So there are basically what I was saying, that when I looked at the data from different surveys, I find comparability is very, very difficult. Can we go to the next slide, please? I don't know how much I missed that earlier because I was shouting for the third slide to come. When it didn't come, I thought there is some problem with your acoustics. Now, annual survey of industries, it is a synthetically constructed employment data. It adds up the man days worked from factory attendance sheets and divides by the number of days factory worked in that year. And that is the reason why during the COVID times also, the employment data does not show a decline, because the factory was closed and the number of days for those days were added up. So I certainly feel very uncertain when you straight away take PLFS data, subtract the factory sector and give the trends. That is something that I would certainly like to learn a little bit more from Goldar and EGROW. Did I mention, Charan Singh ji, did I mention that the data from Goldar EGROW study for 2022-23 manufacturing is 7.8 million higher than the claims data? Did I make that point?
Yes, yes.
Yes. And I also mentioned that the trends that we get from this paper is very, very different from the trend that we get from the claims data. Claims
Yeah, that
data
was all
shows-
heard. That was all heard.
that was heard. Okay. Now we can. Now the question is that since there are serious problems of comparability of the survey data, we have done a paper in Business Standard where we have compared the ASU's data, this NSS data, with the enterprise data, and we have showed that excepting in apparels, in all the sectors, in the unorganized sector, employment has declined. But I take the point from Dr. Goldar that the comparisons are not that easy. And if that is the case, it applies to every researcher. I just show one final slide and then I raise one question which is of general importance. Please go to the last slide, please. This is the data, UPSS, usual, principal and subsidiary status. We have given from this table gives data percentage of manufacturing workers to the total workers by usual, principal and subsidiary status. You do find that the figures, when you take the subsidiary status, you do find the figures don't necessarily go up, it goes down, because the subsidiary status employment in manufacturing is less than the subsidiary status employment in non-manufacturing sector. But what strikes me straight away, that the percentage of workers in manufacturing by principal and subsidiary status from 2017-18 to 2022-23 has gone down. I'm talking about percentage of manufacturing by principal and subsidiary status from UPSS and from the PLFS data shows a decline. Again, this strikes, I mean, I have to resolve it before I accept the thesis that the population, the manufacturing sector has done wonderfully well. But I certainly think there are issues that need to be discussed. Final point. You see, you are calculating the total workers by taking the ratios. The surveys are only giving ratios. You're multiplying the ratios by the population. And I think in the whole analysis, population projection emerged as the hero. I was a member of that committee, Ministry of Health and Welfare. They had constituted that committee, and I am not sharing any personal information. For 8 months of our appointment constitution of the committee never met. It only met for 3 times within a period of 15 days, and we submitted, and we have been saying that the population estimate needs to be checked once again, and it is evident that the population figures given by the Ministry of Health and Welfare is much on the higher side. You know, UN Population Division has clearly stated that Indian population projection for 2036 is much on the higher side. Lancet has said that India believes that its population stabilization will take place by 2065. It will actually take place before 2055 because total fertility rate has declined significantly, and it is, excepting 2 or 3 states, it is below replacement level. And the population projection does not take that into consideration. The other point that strikes me is the urban-rural breakdown. The rural population estimate given by the government of India, this Ministry of Health and Welfare, which is working for RGI, is much on the rural population, much on the lower side. And Shramika Ravi, Prime Minister's Advisory Committee, they have pointed out again and again that rural population is overestimated and urban population is underestimated. And we know that the rural workforce participation rate is much higher than in the urban areas. You are using a very high work participation rate because you have overestimated the total population and overestimated rural component. These are the 2 factors which is really, giving very high figures on manufacturing employment, despite this table showing that the percentage of manufacturing to the total workers is going down. This is a question, I'm addressing to Dr. Virmani also. The basic problem is we don't have the census data. We don't have economic census data. We thought that will clarify. Even that has been dumped. Ministry of Labor wanted to have a survey of the unorganized sector through area frame. I was a member of that team. We struggled, and after about a year, this has again been dumped. I think all these controversies are coming up, and the disagreements are, surfacing basically because we don't have reliable population estimates to multiply, and we really need to address this issue by, conducting this area-based informal sector survey by the Ministry of Labor and population census as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you,
Virmani.
Professor. I think your population point is well taken. With that, let me move to Dr. Surjit Bhalla. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see me? I'm very much here. I have to turn my video on, and there we are.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, I have about 5 points to make, and all of them relate to data and therefore what we derive from it. First, let me completely agree with Professor Kundu that the population estimate, that you don't have population estimates of total workforce, etc., in the PLFS, and never in the NSS, PLFS, etc. And those of you who are on various statistical committees of the government, can you please request them to do that? It's a real problem. We wouldn't be having this debate and this discussion if there was that. So that's the first point. Or related to that point, we have what is completely accepted across the world, the population estimates of the UN Population Division, a point also made by Professor Kundu. That is what I always use for any blow up, the multiplier, etc. So those 2 points. Third point, which I'm surprised that neither Professor Kundu or Professor Goldar have made, is regarding the PLFS data for 1718 and 1819. A lot has been made about the non-comparability of surveys by Professor Kundu. Completely agree with him. But he hasn't made the following simple point, that the ILO in March of this year did, and some of us have been talking about the inadequacies of the PLFS data for quite some time, and particularly for the years 1718 and 1819. And in March of this year, the ILO, and like to be sort of enlightened as to whether they have. I have not been. Let me make the point that ILO has made, and then if anybody knows of the ILO making a similar point for any other country in the world. The point they made, and this is on the website, this is public, this is not private communication, is the 1718 and 1819 PLFS data is incomparable or unusable, both with respect to prior NSS surveys and with respect to post PLFS surveys. So I think it is for us to understand what is going on, and please, I think it should be acknowledged that that is the case. And second, you can't use growth rates when the 1718 and 1819 data are not comparable with anything else. So I don't know why that point is not highlighted. So I am not going to comment on the non-comparability or the different surveys, etc., blow-up factors. I'm going to just concentrate on either 2019-20 onwards or until 2011, 1983 to 2011 for the labor data. The Labor Bureau data is a good data source, but it is not so even for the same year when you had the Labor Bureau data, which is 2011-12, as well as the NSS, you do not have correspondence. Second, the Labor Bureau data, whether you use 14-15, 15-16, or whatever, is for different months in the year. So example, one survey is only for 5 months, the other survey is for 6 months, one is for 12, 13. So, there's a separate analysis that needs to be done by researchers in using the Labor Bureau data. I have looked at it, I looked at it extensively with Tito Das back in 1718 when I was a member of the PMEAC, and actually this paper is on the website of PMEAC. So it is not bad data like the PLFS for 1718 and 1819, but it is something that should be looked at independently. While on 1718 and 1819, I think as researchers, as analysts, as scholars, as those interested in what is happening to the Indian economy, which obviously includes all of us, we also have the fact that the 1718 Consumer Expenditure Survey is also completely out of whack with every other consumer expenditure survey done in India, either before or after. So I think we need, as scholars, to find out what happened, that the very same year, the consumer expenditure survey is completely out of whack. And the very same 2 years. And the reason it's 1718 and 1819 is because they use the same sampling frame 8 quarters. Otherwise, it would have just been 1718. And we need to know who got the survey, how was it collected, whether it is for the consumer expenditure survey or for the PLFS. And, there's very little, it's like the elephant in the room. And we are talking statistics, we're talking growth rates, and we are not looking at the elephant in the room. So I would like to ask both our respected scholars, whose work I've followed very keenly, and I respect a lot of their work, but I think I am a bit surprised. Professor Kundu has looked at the 1718 data, 1819 data, even now he's talked, but neither of them are making any mention, and they obviously must know about this because it's the ILO, which is the major arbiter of data on labor force, just like the World Bank is a major arbiter on the poverty and consumer expenditure surveys. Incidentally, neither the World Bank itself has refused. Matter of fact, they went out of the way to use the 1718 consumer expenditure survey and then published articles stating how they couldn't do anything with the weights, so they manufactured their own weights. This is the World Bank. In order to get whatever, I presume, to get whatever answers they wanted to get. I don't know. But the fact remains that they first reject the 1718 survey on the basis of that the weights don't correspond, and then go ahead and adjust the weights using CMI data. So it was the CMI data that they used, and they found that the CMI weights don't make any sense. So they didn't have access to the 1780. So that's, please, I think, I don't know how I can move to first base in discussing the results, which has either consumption expenditure, poverty results, or labor force, which has 1718 and 1819 data in it. And then I want to point out, now with the data that is good, which is all the years except 1718 and 1819, and much has been made about, as Professor Goldar correctly mentioned, about how the unpaid family workers have really gone up and women have really gone up, etc. And this was very correctly pointed out by Mr. Goldar, and very correctly, it turns out, and I'm trying to get the share of unpaid family workers has stayed the same since 2000. Let me here. The unpaid family workers in the entire economy, and you can do women, you can do men, and whatever, was 17.7% in 2011. And matter of fact, that has been the peak until 17.2% in 2020 and 17.4% in 2021 and 18.2% in 22-23. And in 2004, it was 23.7, which is another outlier data, but never mind. And in 99, which nobody has objected to, including myself, was 20.8. So this idea that somehow unpaid family workers is contributing to the increase, your estimate of the increase in employment is, as very correctly pointed out by Professor Goldar, is untenable. Matter of fact, if you now do the current weekly status, not the usual status, then the unpaid family workers as a proportion of total employment in 2011 was 16.4. In 22-23, the very year, they're saying that unpaid family workers are, contributing the total increase in employment, it's 15.5. Okay? 15.5% of total employment, current weekly status, is less than it was in 2011. And indeed, if you ignore the 17, 18, and 8, mind you, in 17, 18 data, unpaid family workers were 12%. And 18 data was 11.4% of the lowest it's ever been. Okay? So the economy must have been really booming and the employment. So anyway, I don't want to belabor the point that 17, 18 and 18, 19 data is garbage. So please don't use it. And use of the 22, 23 or the unpaid family workers is declining or staying the same. There's no argument to suggest, no data to suggest that it's going up. Now we come to manufacturing employment. And now what Professor Goldar uses, Professor Kundu used, what I use is on the manufacturing sector of the data. Okay. Now, they have the share of manufacturing or the total workers in manufacturing, as well as total workers for a fair amount of the population. We can go into that. It's not a small number, and I've got the number here somewhere, that the industrial classification code, which is used to determine whether a worker is in manufacturing or in agriculture, etc., is missing. Okay, for all, just not there. For every year, they don't get the data. So what has been done is you use the total employment, and whether you use shares or not, and then you use manufacturing employment or agricultural employment, and you have to be very careful about the missing industrial classification data. Then a couple of other points. So I've made multiply, absolutely correct. Missing, oh yes. Now, the manufacturing. Now let's just look at correctly done manufacturing employment in 2011 was 54.7 million, and this is using the UN population estimates. Okay. In 2019-20 was 55.9. In 2021 was 56 million. So therefore there is no data that shows that in the COVID year, manufacturing employment went up. It stayed exactly the same as 2011, basically 1 million more. In 21-22, this is where, so therefore the growth rate is solid in manufacturing. It goes from 2019-20, 56 million to 60.4 million. And in 22-23, it goes from 60.4 to 63.1. So you have a solid increase, which is the major point of Professor Goldar, of manufacturing employment in the last 2 years, since 21-22 and 22-23. And yes, and that's maybe in the question answers, but I think my plea is, or in the shift from agriculture, one last point. So a lot has been made about there being a mega shift to agriculture, what I would implore my colleagues doing this is that break up agriculture into, and you can do that from the industrial classification code of all fruits and vegetables and cereals and what is called traditional cropping, okay, and the rest, okay, in agriculture. So there is mixed farming, it's called, just look it up, etc. Now, in terms of the agriculture that is traditional agriculture, including fruits, vegetables, and I'll be writing this up, but in more detail sometime, in 2019-20, remember 2019-20, the data is completely solid. And in 2019-20, it was 194 million. In 2011, it was 193.3 million. So 2011 and 2019-20, we can't take the intervening years because, as I said, it's garbage. But 2011-12 and 2019-20, the agricultural total employment was about the same, which means the share is going down, but it is the same. In 22-23, agricultural employment has gone down from 193.8 to 172.2. Mixed farming, while we are talking about shifting people from agriculture, this, that, etc., now mixed farming and other classifications, etc., the number of workers in all of this other stuff, non-traditional agriculture, non-perennial crops, whatever it is, in 2011 was 15.5 million. Okay, and that's when the total agricultural employment was the same. So this, I would call this good employment, was 15.5. In 21-22 was 42, and in 22-23 is 60. So while the total number of people in agriculture is staying is marginally increasing, it is the fact that it is the non-traditional agriculture where employment in agriculture is increasing. And in the traditional agriculture, it is declining. That's about all that I have.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you, Dr. Bhalla. Dr. Goldar, would you want to respond now, or I have two more people on my list right now? Whatever you prefer.
Yeah, you can have them.
Also, okay. Yeah, so Professors Kingshuk Sarkar from Goa and Dr. Manoj Jatav, I think the next two. Please be brief because we have kind of taken a lot of time. Huh? So, Professor Kingshuk Sarkar, you had some comments?
Yes, Dr. Virmani, I have one or a couple of comments to make on the presentation. So I think the data inconsistency and other things have already been mentioned by Professor Kundu and Professor Bhalla. So I'm not going into those. I'm just pointing out few conceptual things. One is that the data presented showed that there has been a feminization of agriculture. So in the sense that the increase in labor force participation, a substantial increase happened in agriculture. So it's like reversal of the structural transformation that happened during 2008 to 12 up to 2018 that happened. But there has been, like, if again we are going back to agriculture, that is negating the Lucian kind of transformation that we are partially experienced in the previous decade. Agriculture already has about 45% of the share of employment, when agriculture is providing only 14% of the GDP. So agriculture obviously having a large number of unemployment and underemployment and disguised unemployment. So this is one point I would like to mention here, that female labor force participation rising in agricultural sector is not something which is good. Like it's a reversal of the structural transformation. Another point that was mentioned during the presentation was that non-farm rural manufacturing, those are informal rural manufacturing, that has gone up. But what kind of rural manufacturing, what kind of informal rural manufacturing, those sectors, those particular industries were not at all mentioned. So I'd be still doubtful about that claim that rural non-farm manufacturing, the female labor force participation has gone up. The third point that I would like to make is that it has been mentioned very prominently in the presentation that the female labor force participation or labor force participation in the manufacturing sector went up because of one of the main reasons is the labor law reform. But what kind of labor law reform was not at all mentioned? Labor law reform, one is labor code that has been passed in the parliament in 2020 and 19, but now is still not implemented last 4 years. And some states have amended the Industrial Dispute Act or Factories Act or Contract Labor Act to have the threshold going up from 100 to 300, from 20 to 40, like that. But that is relevant for the formal manufacturing. Here, the informal manufacturing sector has gone up. Informal manufacturing has nothing to do with labor law reform as such. So when you are using the term that labor law reform led to this kind of increase in labor force participation, we should be very cautious what kind of reform we are talking about, because the reality is showing the opposite. It is informal manufacturing that is going up, not the formal. If it is has been labor law reform, then employment would have gone up in the formal manufacturing sector. So these are the 3 points like I would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Manoj Jadhav.
Sir, I just want to intervene. Professor
Yeah.
Manoj has just left, but
Oh.
Professor R.S. Ghumman wants to speak, if you permit him, sir.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because we have gone quite a bit. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Singh. In fact, it's very interesting session and self-contradictory presentations by the learned scholars. Not going into detail, my first question to Dr. Goldar is, first one comment, very rosy picture and hypothetical picture and theoretical analysis has been presented by Dr. Goldar. I wonder from where he has brought this data. The ground realities do not go by that data and presentation which have been given by Dr. Goldar. My pointed question is, does periodic labor force survey actually estimate the unemployment situation in the informal manufacturing sector in particular, and also that of informal sector in general? My impression is that PLFS just extrapolates the organized sector's data and juxtapose on the informal sector. That is first question. The second is, why Government of India stopped undertaking NSSO large sample surveys on employment and unemployment? My understanding is PLFS doesn't capture the whole picture. Here in Punjab and in the surrounding areas, what I have done my own work and I have seen that there is a lot of disguised unemployment and underemployment in agriculture sector. And when we talk of rural non-farm sector, particularly manufacturing, it's the urban lot which is entering into that, and poor people of the rural area do not find any place in that. Then where are better jobs for men? When Goldar talks about that, that females are entering, but female workforce employment participation is much, much lower, the government data says. Professor Kundu's analysis is much near the reality. And one question to Dr. Surjit Bhalla. I have been closely following his poverty studies, his poverty estimates, and if employment is increasing and poverty is falling, then why are we at 111th rank in terms of hunger index out of 125 countries? What's the reason for that? Will Surjit Bhalla give his just one last question? Why 81.5 crore population is being food subsidies? If employment is rising, there is no disguised unemployment, there is no underemployment, poverty is declining, why then we are giving 81.5 crore? And my friend Surjit Bhalla, you have pressed CMI data. I don't. Because whatever doesn't suit you or to the government, you trace it. And you yourself say 17, 18,
Okay,
18,
let's
19,
not get into
18,
politics.
19 data is garbage. The garbage data was collected by your government.
Okay, thank you.
No, I didn't get the last point that he made. Just
Surjit, please, it's okay. Maybe later.
no,
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
I have to. I think Dr. Goldar, please. I would like you to respond now, and if we have time, we'll go to the general.
How much time should I take?
I think you take your time because there were a lot of pointed questions.
Yeah,
So I'll give you whatever you want, then we can cut short the rest.
I will not
already
answer
a
all
lot of questions.
No, certainly, I will not answer all the questions.
Whatever you want, it's fine.
Yeah, first question I will answer. That is in my table, why I use the 2015-16 data, but not 2016-17 data. He said if I had used 16-17 data, then my results would have shown a faster growth in unorganized. So even with 5% growth, people are objecting. If I had showed 8% growth, people have objected much more. So I think it was safe to do 15 rather than bring in 16. In any case, I have said Labor Bureau data, PLFS data is not exactly comparable. There is no point in going into all this. Second question is, why our data do not match with claims? These people do not understand it. Manufacturing definition, somebody raised what is manufacturing? Manufacturing definition in national accounts and manufacturing definition in PLFS are different. For example, cotton ginning. Cotton ginning is a part of manufacturing in national accounts, but is not a part of manufacturing in PLFS. It is a part of agriculture. Custom tailoring, all these tailors you see around, they are part of manufacturing in PLFS, but they're part of services in national accounts. But claims data matches its classification exactly with national accounts because it needs labor data, capital data, output data, input data. So it must be exactly aligned. That is the reason claims classification of national manufacturing is different. The biggest difference is custom tailoring. It is a huge employment. We include custom tailoring in our estimate. Claims does not include custom tailoring as a part of manufacturing. They include it as a part of services. The third point is population, which a lot of people have mentioned. But you have to give me a solution. You have to give me a solution. You say these population numbers are bad. The UN population numbers are bad. I don't know which, but ultimately, unless we have a reliable population estimate, I can't do anything. But all I can say is, even if I had used a different population estimate, different set of population estimates, my numbers would have shown a rapid growth in manufacturing employment, rapid most likely, and a rapid growth of unorganized manufacturing and so on. So these numbers estimates are not, it may not be 8%, it may be 6%, it may not be 7%, it may be 5%. But the growth rate will not change so much if I shift from one population set to another. Now I will not go into one. Then there is an issue of rural, urban, etc. I will not leave that. There is a comment that there is feminization of agriculture. Incidentally, if you read our paper, we have said now there is feminization of industrial labor because 70% of the new jobs in industries are going to women. So this is a new phenomenon in India. It's not happening in services. It's not happening elsewhere. It's happening in agriculture, and now it has started happening in manufacturing. Another comment that was made is that we have been having a decline in the agriculture share in employment, and now it has started growing, especially with women. Is that a structural retrogression? Yes and no. To some extent, yes. But ultimately, what is happening now is suddenly our agriculture sector has started growing fast. And that is the reason more employment is growing. Perhaps in due course, this will get corrected. But for this some time it's happening. And there are certain other reasons. I cannot go into that. But in any case, I have suggested in the presentation that we have to move out a lot of these women from agriculture to manufacturing and services. So notice the path I have indicated. Once that is done, then this issue will be handled. One point was made about labor laws. What labor laws are we considering? Labor laws that we are considering are basically Factories Act and Industrial Dispute Act. They affect the organized sector, but not actually. Factories Act affects the informal sector. Because of the Factories Act, there is a tendency for small factories to remain below 10. Once that limit is raised to 10 to 20, it becomes possible for them to go beyond 9 and become 10, 15, so that relatively small size factories, which because of the Factories Act were keeping their employment below 10, now have a freedom to go up. And that tends to encourage the informal sector. There is another thing, any state which does the amendments creates a more conducive environment for everybody to grow, not only large, small, even small to grow faster. So this has a signaling effect. Final point with which I'll stop. Have I posed a very rosy picture? I don't think so. These are facts. It's not that anybody, what happens is, when you see something new, you don't believe that. CLEMS data showed it is 8% growth. Some doubts were, we are showing 8% growth. Next year, Dr. Bhalla Paddy will make estimates, will say 8% growth. When the data for 2023-24 become available, we compute and say with 7% growth. 20 papers will come. So question is, when you first time hear it, it looks very doubtful. Please wait for some time. Then you will say, not me. There are 15 other people who are saying India's employment is growing very fast. There was a mistake in one comment that was made as if PLFS is extrapolating from the organized sector data to unorganized sector, which is not right. PLFS uses an area frame approach in which a village or an area, urban area block is selected. Every house is listed. Every house, I want the underline, every house is listed. Every house, and out of that sample is taken. It is not that some organized sector employment numbers are created on the. Please read the report of the PLFS and read the methodology that is explained there. This is an area based, so there is no question of urban area estimates being extrapolated to rural area estimates. Thank you very much. I'll stop.
Thank you. I'm glad. I think, too much politics in public comments. I think we've had a very good discussion, Professor Goldar, Professor Kundu, and Dr. Bhalla. So, Charan, I think we have exhausted our time, unless you really want to pick up a few more questions. Or Charan?
Yeah, I think, sir, I'll go with your judgment.
Yeah.
We have crossed the time.
So because we've had a rich technical discussion, I really don't want to get into politics,
Yes.
too much politics
Yes.
every day in the newspaper, in TV. I think we've had a solid discussion of the data, the results, etc. So in that sense, it's been a good discussion, even for me. Some of the technical issues I no longer get into, given my policy thing, but it's very useful to have all these experts tell us the details which we have to keep in mind. With that, I thank all three of them and hand it back to you, Charan.
So thank you very much. I do not know if you will permit. Dr. Bhalla has raised his hand. If you want,
he wants to
give him a
reply.
choice. If you want to give him.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, can I also come for a minute only?
Okay,
after
If you've been asked direct questions or some direct thing, please go ahead. Professor Kundu.
Let Surjit speak
Surjit first and then Professor Kundu. Yeah. Okay.
Surjit.
Yeah.
You take your turn. Yes, I'll just come just briefly for a minute.
You're going to say
Surjit
something or
first.
I'm going to say something?
Surjit, you're first.
Okay, I didn't get. Okay. One point which is applicable to everybody is the citation of the CLEMS data as being very different from, or as being a data source. The CLEMS data is nothing more than usual status from NSS PLFS surveys for people, individuals greater than equal to 15 years. It is not as if CLEMS says something or the RBI says something. It is the NSS/PLFS data. So I think we should recognize that to say that CLEMS is saying this and something else is saying something else, no. What CLEMS data very unusually does do and has an extrapolation for 23-24, and that data is not yet available from PLFS. So let us wait rather than use the extrapolation for the PLFS annual report to be released. Point number one. Point number two, the reason the hunger index, if I had points, it was the NSS used to measure hunger in India till 2004. And hunger was defined as anybody in your family did not receive 2 square meals a day. That percentage came down to less than 1% or 2% of the entire population. This is 2004 when they stopped using this definition of hunger. So, we have some hunger index which is based on calories or some other nonsense. So please, let us be sure of our definitions. That's been my whole point in this discussion. And then we can proceed forward with analysis. Mind you, Arvind, this is not political. Okay? I'm using NSS data, which all of us are going to are using, and I'm using their definitions of hunger, and that doesn't show. In 2004, it did not say what they stopped doing.
I've dealt with hunger. Surjit, I've dealt with hunger. I'll come in at the end. Professor Kundu?
Yeah.
No, I agree with Surjit that there are problems in comparing the Labor Bureau data with the NSS data or PLFS data because the entire year is not covered in many surveys. But nonetheless, the table that I presented, which gave the figures for Labor Bureau, excepting the first one, the 6 Labor Bureau reports I've given, they are really comparable as far as the months are concerned. And Goldar, you mentioned about 16, 17 being on the lower side. 15, 16 is much on the lower side. And some people have allergy to the PLFS data for 2017-18. So, but you use that 17-18 data to interpolate. So you could have avoided that when you have the data for 2016-17, which gives a higher figure than 15-16 as far as the principal status is concerned. Other point that I wanted to mention to you, Goldar, that you talked about differences in the coverage of the claims with your coverage, defining this. The differences in the trend and the number is not because of that. It is because of the population figure. Claims has used the population estimate, which is very different. I think you have used the data for the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare continuously, whereas they have used Ministry of Family Welfare Health data only for the years for the PLFS 2020 onwards. And that's why your growth rates are very high in 2020 onwards. But earlier, 15-16 to 2019, they have used the population figure from the census data, some kind of an extrapolation on the basis of that. That I think you should investigate that how come your results are so very different in terms of the trend. It is not because of certain activities not being classified here and there. It is because of the population, because real hero is emerging as the population estimates. And we really need, Dr. Virmani, we need
you made this
the
point.
population estimates. We have been asking, Shamika Ravi has been asking, urban figures are gross underestimates and rural workforce participation is much higher. You use that for much of the
We've got
population.
your
That is
point.
why you're.
We've got
Thank
your
you,
point.
thank you. I hope you take it forward.
Repeated, but okay, again, Bhalla, have you been attacked again? Okay. Response.
I don't know why.
Sir, may I come in
It's
for
a
half a
point.
minute? I'm Suresh Agarwal, co-author of
No,
Professor
no,
Goldar.
sorry, now, no more. I'm sorry, no.
Yeah.
Surjit,
Just
please.
clarification to what Professor
No,
Kundu is
no,
asking.
no, I'm going to clarify. Surjit, please go ahead.
Yeah, that I stated, and somehow, I don't know, maybe I can't communicate. The claims data is exactly the same as the PLFS NSS data for all the years, except for all the years. So therefore, the idea that they have done something which Professor
Okay.
Kundu was saying, no.
I'm talking about absolute number. Surjit, absolute number is not ratios.
I am talking about absolute numbers.
Numbers, the population estimates used by claims is different from what Goldar has done. That's all I'm saying.
No, I am
Why
talking about the
population
fact-
census is not there so far?
That is, you'd ask Dr. Virmani.
Please.
We are
No,
we are
this
now.
is
we
not
are
my
now-
question answer session.
we are
Please,
now in
please
2024.
mute.
The population census
Charan,
is not
I'm
there.
sorry. I do not want to be interrupted. Please mute whoever's talking. Okay? And let me answer one question. Hunger. I was the first person to do a detailed report on hunger in the Planning Commission. You know what happened to it? I found that the largest percentage of hungry people were in a state which nobody had thought. It was West Bengal, which was ruled by communists at that time. And you know what happened? The member who was appointed from West Bengal vetoed it. He removed that. He censored it. It was not allowed to be published, that whole table in the Planning Commission. After that, this whole question was removed from the next survey. Okay, so let's not get into this. All those hunger estimates which you read in the papers are a load of crap. Okay, I've used those hunger estimates. I wanted those to continue, but they were stopped due to political reasons. Enough of politics. That's it. Okay, so Charan, you want to continue this Q&A? Please continue.
No, sir, we are concluding because this is the first session, special session on employment that we have done. We are trying to do 4 in the series. We are trying to approach Dr. Bhalla if he agrees, Professor Mehrotra, and I am also trying to bring in CMI. As the Friday slots are booked till end of September, the special sessions we are planning to do on an extra day than Fridays, and we are planning to bring, so that discussion on unemployment is crystal clear, as we have seen today. And sir, thanks for chairing the session. I want to thank Professor Goldar, Dr. Bhalla and Professor Kundu. Also want to thank Professor Kingshuk, Professor Ghuman, all of you for being here. In the chat box, there are so many questions, but as an economist who is not a specialist on employment, but a fiscal monetary expert to some extent, I would say, even I'm not sure what is the conclusion of today's discussion. And when I'm working in the field, when I'm talking to people, when I'm doing surveys with MSMEs, I get a different feel from what I'm getting in the discussion on the table today. So I hope in the series that we are going to follow up, and I hope Dr. Bhalla, Professor Mehrotra, I think he's in the audience, and CMI will come out and share their research. Maybe the truth is somewhere in between and we are missing it. I want to once again reiterate what Dr. Virmani has said. It's been a great learning session for many of us, including me. On hunger, I would like to mention, and I don't want to be contested on that because we are running out of time, that me and Dr. Virmani in recent years wrote a couple of papers on global hunger index, which we think is a misnomer, calculated wrongly, and we have offered that we at EGROW are willing to recalculate and tell to the world what is the right way to compute a hunger index. The existing global hunger index, which comes out every year, which misled the government at one point of time, because of which 80 crore people get free rations, I think is a misnomer. The indices they use are wrongly computed. And not today, but if you look up the work which me and Dr. Virmani have written in popular press, you will see we have explained it so well, crystal clear, that the global hunger index is a misnomer. With this, I want to conclude this session. I want to thank each one of you. And then I also want to mention that on Friday in our regular slot, we have this time a discussion by a book being discussed by Subbarao, former governor, RBI. Dr. Surjit Bhalla will be chairing the session, and we have two discussants, one a civil servant, Subhash Garg, and then one RBI, Madam Shamla Gopinath, who will be the discussants to that book. And former Governor RBI would be speaking for about 40 minutes in that presentation. I would invite each one of you. The timing is the same, 4 to 5:30 on Friday, 3 days from today. I would invite each one of you to please come and take the benefit of that discussion. I'll keep you posted on our next discussion on employment, which will happen in the next 45 days. We plan to do all the four. With that, thank you and have a great evening. Look forward to seeing you all on Friday. Thank you.